Okay, I was talking in the last video about postmodernism and how it operates in critiquing reason. It operates according to a methodology which we could call, or we did call, deconstruction, or the hermeneutics of suspicion, which means that you deconstruct the constructs of Western values or of anything in general, of values in general, and find the hidden power behind it, or the hidden power game, or the hidden will to power, desire for power that's behind all values in Western culture. That's why Nietzsche's philosophy, which he thinks, by the way, is a kind of Darwinism, and we'll come back to that. It's this kind of universal acid. Daniel Dennett describes Darwinism this way, and Nietzscheanism is a kind of Darwinism. It's a universal acid that attempts to eat through everything. Think about it. If you reduce everything to power, you can have a field day. And what's funny is when Nietzsche starts doing this, it's very convincing as you start seeing. Think about some of the critiques you see of justice and of idea of human rights. And one of the things we're going to talk about in the class is critical race theory. And one of critical race theory's points is simply that human rights language actually marginalizes. It's actually about power. It actually oppresses. It's actually a power game. Even the values like that we take for granted as self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that everybody's equal. There's actually a power play involved in that. Okay. So that's what we were talking about last video. Deconstruction in the hermeneutics of suspicion, and that we said postmodernism is a critique of reason, and what's left when you critique reason? Power. Now, here's interesting thing. Why critique reason? Why do this? Why do this? Well, postmodernism really is the French reception of German philosophy. What German philosophy? Really Nietzsche and Martin Heidegger. Okay, that's the early 20th century. Nietzsche died in 1900, so late 19th, early 20th century. And it's after World War II, and people are trying to figure out what the hell just happened. What the hell happened here? And one of the reasons for critiquing reason is to try to figure out what happened in World War II, the Holocaust, 6 million dead. What led to this? And there's a primary ethical concern, therefore, in postmodernism. Okay, postmodernism as an ideology. Now, I'm talking about not as an explicit philosophical ideology, not simply as the metaphysics of modernity, but they are the same thing. Okay. And there's this idea in postmodernism, explicit postmodernism, that reason leads to violence. That if you think you have the truth, you're going to kill people. That truth itself is violent. And there's a kind of anti-fundamentalism about it. That is, reason and rational categories, they exclude. They're hegemonic. They oppress. Okay? You might have heard this term before, logocentrism, or phallogocentrism. The idea of that logos is connected with the phallus or the male, and that's oppressive and ostracizing and exclusive and marginalizing, okay? So there's kind of ethical motivation to postmodernism. What caused the horrors of World War II? Why did Western culture go this route? Well, it went this route, according to some postmodernists, because of reason. Michel Foucault will say this. Nietzsche will say this even, okay? So that's why postmodernism arose as an explicit philosophical enterprise, okay? But what's interesting is that the explicit philosophical enterprise, and I don't know which is causal and which is the cause and which is the effect, actually creep down into our own metaphysics that we're sort of swimming in that we don't even realize. That is our pre-thematic understanding of being, our pre-thematic understanding of things in the world, of reality itself, is also postmodernism. So I can't tell you if it's the postmodern philosophers who are articulating this or that their philosophy actually trickled down into the world. I think it started to do this really, really explicitly, or really obviously, I should say, in 2014, 2015. Okay, well, right now everything is postmodernism. So one of the values of the class is simply, we're trying to figure out what postmodernism is and trying to talk about it and scientific reductionism, but so we can better understand the politics and the ethical values that are going on right now. And I put values in quotations. Okay, so why critique reason? Postmodernism is a critique of reason. And scientific reductionism leads to postmodernism. Why? There's an ethical reason, but there's also two other reasons. So ethical, right? Another thing about the ethical reason for postmodernism, by the way, is I don't know if you're familiar with this sort of cliche that people in cities are very liberal, and they are. The cities always tend to go blue, and people in the rural areas or in the country are always red, and that they're less tolerant in the red areas, and they're more like a bunch of rubes, and they're very strict and fundamentalist, whereas people in the city are very cosmopolitan and very open to things. And there's a sense in which there's a truth to that, only in the sense, and I put an asterisk by that, to say that, people have to live together in cities, and you start becoming more relativistic, and people are, you think about it, people are crunched together in cities, and you have to all figure out how to survive in cities. And one way to do it is to become a relativist and become very tolerant and embrace perspectivism. Anyway, that's just sort of an aside. I was talking about why critique reason. Well, we said ethical reasons, right? The ethical reason that truth itself, reason itself, is hegemonic. It's phallogocentric. It's oppressive. But there's also this idea that we'll see in a more softer version of postmodernism, or a more lighter as opposed to the darker version of postmodernism, the light side versus the dark side, is that reason fails to fully articulate the world. Reason can't fully articulate the world. There are things that rationality misses. Okay, and we'll see that a little bit with Heidegger. So that's another angle to postmodernism. Why postmodern philosophy becomes so popular now is rationality can't totally encapsulate the world. Right? Mathematics, logic, these kind of things. There are things about the world, namely moods and emotions, that simply get left behind in the theoretical rational framework. Okay, so postmodernism isn't simply just motivated by critiquing reason and truth for ethical reasons, right? But it's also motivated for simply the idea of the reductionist element to reason itself. That there are truths that go beyond reason. Okay, this will be a big idea in some of the, or I don't know what would be the not explicit but implicit idea that you'll see in a lot of the readings we do. And then finally, so there's ethical reasons for critiquing reason. There's, I don't know, this idea that reason fails to articulate the world. And finally, Nietzsche's reason. Nietzsche, and this is the most, I think, interesting one. He thinks reason actually destroys itself. That reason, in its own search for truth, actually comes to destroy itself and self-destruct. That is, we could put it this way: the death of God, wrought by modern science and its quest for truth, is actually the suicide of modern science. We could even say this: reason, in its will to truth, has destroyed itself in its revelation. And this is the interesting thing: in its revelation that the will to truth is actually the will to power. Okay. So, ethical, reason fails to articulate the world, and reason actually destroys itself, or the will to truth destroys itself.